The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André. I am your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another action-packed, fun-filled show. Today's guest is Fabrice Sapolsky, a name you may recognize if you're familiar with Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse, because he's the co-creator of Spider-Man Noir, a character that's gone on to become quite popular because of Spider-Verse movies. But his creation, the original version, was significantly different from what we got in those Spider-Verse films, and we do get into that and talk. But Fabrice is much more than just the co-creator of that. He is a journalist for comics that created a pretty amazing thing in Europe, or France specifically, I guess, when it comes to comic magazines, and some amazing stuff, like hell of a career. And now he's gone on to start his own comic imprint. He's now producing, making his own comics, and making them for others as well. And he's doing some amazing work. We have a great conversation, very great talk, and it's refreshing to talk to somebody that has gone through the big system, come out the other side, and is doing their own thing. Because there's a candidness and an honesty you don't always get when people feel like they have to, be diplomatic when they're working for a big company. So I was happy that Fabrice was so open and giving with his time and his story, which was great. I love these conversations. Now that I'm doing them weekly, they seem to be coming fast and furious. Sometimes we get some big names, and I'm trying to book to get those recorded right away so they don't have to twist in the wind too long. Because of that, I'm doing recordings 2-3 times a week, which, for a guy like Mark Maron or any of the other big ones, I'm sure that's, normal for them. For me, with a regular life and, responsibilities, jobs and whatnot to do, it gets a little tough. But, I really love it. Like, this show was just something I kind of started as a COVID thing. And it's really ballooned into something that's been really rewarding to me as a comic fan, as someone who likes to talk to people, as someone who celebrates artistic types and what they're doing and where they're going. And yeah, this podcast has been a real labor of love, and I wouldn't give any second of it. It's been amazing. But and it's coming along. I think things are going well. So it's a blast. I'm having a great time. I hope you are as well. If you're here, I'm sure you are. And I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show. It's a blast as always. So, we don't need to toil too much here with talk and whatnot. Let's just get into our conversation with Fabrice Sapolsky.
All right.
How's your day going?
Today's going busy as every day of my life. It's just terribly busy. And right now I was trying to finish editing a video for my column that I'm doing on Fridays. Mm-hmm. And it takes a long time because talks about my travel to Angoulême last week. And 2 weeks ago, and there's a lot to edit. So
I would imagine, yeah. Cool.
But I think people are going to enjoy the immersive experience of being at a festival that doesn't look like anything that in the United States. So.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that a lot of us in North American types. I'm in Canada, so similar. But we don't realize that's what I was interested to talk to you mostly was about the how different those worlds are, in the European
I have a lot
world.
To say about that.
Well, that sounds good. Well, let's get started, I guess. So where you grew up in France, that's correct?
I was born and raised in Paris, France. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I guess you could call it my hometown. Mm-hmm. Even though I always say that Paris is overrated, and I really think it is.
Really? Why do you think that?
Well, I mean, look, let's face it. I've been in the US for 9 years, almost 9 years.
Hmm.
I have no regret. And apart from this last trip that I made this month in France for the Angoulême Festival, usually after 2 days, I want to go back to New York. So it's it tells you all you need to know. Like I had 44 years of my life in France.
Hmm.
I think that's enough.
Well, this is certainly dispelling the rich, vibrant destination that it's marketed as towards us North
Well,
Americans for being.
it's always the same, you know. It's always the same. Like when you're experiencing a city as a local, as a tourist, you don't
Mm,
see the same things.
for
So,
sure. Yeah, I know. It seems like almost every celebrity worth their salt has a summer home or some kind of a home in France that they talk about at some point in an interview, and it always
well,
seems like
good for them. Good
yeah.
for them. Uh, for me, like Paris broke my heart. It's just like too many times.
Oh, really? Just as far as like because you're too close to it growing up there?
No, I'm not gonna get into details now, but
Okay,
like
sure.
I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and like especially I was always an outsider in the comic book business over
Hmm.
there. I mean, I'm still an outsider in the comic book business, but I'm a different kind of outsider now.
Well, that's interesting. So, like growing up, like, were you reading comics as a kid growing up in Paris?
Um, yes, I started. I mean, I discovered first French comics for some reason. My dad, he was not a collector, but there were a couple of comic book, I mean, graphic novels,
Hmm.
hardcover graphic novels that were at home, usually in the bathroom, restroom.
Yeah.
Um, there was a Tintin album that I can remember of, with the Castafiore on the cover.
Hmm.
And there was probably a Spirou or something like that. It was like uh, French comics,
Hmm.
Franco-Belgian comics. But when I was 7, I as I started like to be conscious and know how to read, and I was walking to school. On my way to school, there was a newsstand.
Hmm.
And from the window outside, you could see the American comics because, like, back in the day, American comics were not allowed in bookstores or in libraries. American comics were only in newsstands.
Really? Was that because they were I assume they were translated, so they weren't.
They were translated. I mean, there's a little bit of anti-Americanism.
Uh,
There's a little bit of snub, you know.
yeah, I get that.
And but on the other hand, American comics were hugely popular because they were cheaper and more accessible to
Mm,
people like us.
yeah.
So I mean, I remember that it was something like 5 francs, which is probably $1, not even $1 from now.
Hmm.
Um, and for that you had 100 page with full color, square bound, every month. So I started as soon as I had enough money to get in and buy my first comic. I bought one, and it was not a superhero comic. It was Conan the Barbarian.
Nice. Classic.
Classic John
Yeah.
Buscema, Roy Thomas. Um, and it was really great. And then from that point on, I did not look back, but my first love was American comics. Like it was always American comics because they were more accessible, they were fun, they were jumping at you. And I always found French comics very traditional, very boring, very slow paced.
Well,
So it was
European comics got away from like you guys didn't have a lot of like of the core books. I mean, Tintin is one that comes to mind, obviously, but in like the oh God, Asterix and those sort of things. I mean, it didn't
I
seem like
mean,
there was a lot that were really superhero based, if
which
any, right?
doesn't matter, honestly.
Yeah.
It's never about the costume. It's about the substance.
Hmm.
But you know, I was never a fan of comedy comics and graphic novels like
Hmm.
Asterix and Gaston Lagaffe
Hmm.
and Lucky Luke, and I was never a fan of that. What people in France call gros nez, which is translates into big noses, because all the comedy noses. I was never into that. Like, to me, comics had to be a journey. They had to be an invitation for to stimulate your imagination. And I felt like comedy comics are a little more passive. Like, you receive the jokes, you laugh, you move on to the next. Not my thing. So that's why I loved Spider-Man. That's why I love Daredevil. That's why I loved Rom Space Knight. That's why I love all these series where there was an emotional engagement. There was an emotional connection with the characters that we didn't have. I mean, at the time, I couldn't find in French comics,
Hmm.
and that's because, like, French comics are, and I always say that when I'm asked about what's the difference, I always say this. I say that there's a distance between French comics and the reader, a distance that is really, really short between the reader and American comics, and a distance that is completely non-existent in manga because it's all emotion.
Hmm.
And so the relationship between the reader and the material and the medium is what makes the difference in storytelling and how you perceive your comic, whether it's American, European, or Asian.
Never heard it described that way before. That actually makes a lot of sense. Like
Thank you.
especially considering that
Always
you're,
that for a long time.
yeah,
Been taught.
especially that you related to Marvel so much. Like, I'm assuming DC was available as well in the places you were getting your comics.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel was really the dominant force because the Marvel licensee was consistent.
Hmm.
DC was spread into different licensees. It was not in order. It was a little messy. So they they did not build the culture for, like, kids of my generation
Yeah.
the way Marvel did.
Yeah.
And especially, I think the most popular comic when I was growing up was the X-Men, because the
Yeah.
X-Men and Claremont and Burns X-Men were international.
Hmm.
So we could relate way more with the X-Men than we could with any other American comic book.
Yeah. When I was in Europe a few years ago, I remember like went to a local comic shop. We were in Scotland, and I was looking at the shelves, and there were like all kinds of Marvel books there that, like, with characters I didn't recognize. Like, they were exclusive to the European market, which was
I mean, they
cool.
were
Like,
exclusive to the UK market,
oh
like,
yes, yeah,
because they've had a Marvel UK imprint for a very long time, and they developed their own set of characters that have been published for a very, very long time. So
yeah, it was kind of eye
even
opening.
even though they stopped doing it at one point, it's still very vivid in people's memory.
That's very cool. So we're like, after reading and getting into it, was the art and the writing and stuff coming with you as a kid, or is that something that came a little later on?
Can you repeat that question?
Oh, sorry. When you were like, as you were getting into the comics as a kid, was starting to do the art and the writing? Was that something that started right away, or did that come a little
Yes.
later? Yeah,
Yes. I mean,
yeah.
when I was in my teenage years, my brother and I, we were doing fanzines. We
Nice.
were writing and drawing our own superhero comics, and we were selling it at school. It was fun. It was fun.
That's awesome.
Uh, the thing is that, I've always had a passion for publishing.
Hmm.
I always loved the idea of publishing, and press. And I was a huge consumer of magazines for a very, very, very long time. Like, at one point, it was like, I don't know, $200 a week that was spending magazines, not just because I liked the idea of magazines, but also because I got a lot of inspiration in terms of design, in terms of topics, in terms of everything. And even after we got the internet, I still was a magazine reader. I think I've stayed a magazine reader until I moved to the US, where here the magazine culture has collapsed.
Yeah, mostly. I find it's I mean, it's still there, but it's like confined to like grocery stores and stuff, or like
And
pharmacies.
it's also a lot of anthologies and patrimonial stuff and
Yeah.
reprints. It's not as fresh as it used to be.
Yeah, you're right. There is something lost there. I feel like when you could go and browse the magazine section, and
Right.
like as a kid, it was like the Star Wars or the I remember Ultimate Marvel put out like a magazine when the Ultimate Universe was a thing that I used to get. But yeah, I feel like it's mostly now just stuff on your tablet. Like there's a horror magazine I read on my tablet, and that's about as far as I get into the magazine world nowadays. But
Yeah.
you're right, you do lose something about that ephemeralness of holding that magazine and
Right.
selecting it from the.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when did you start like you were self-publishing? Were you just selling zines out of local shops or getting where you could?
Yeah, no, it was on consignment basis. Like we were going to a couple of comic shops and we were putting them there. And every month we were coming back and say, hey, how many did you sell to? Okay, we're gonna give you a few bucks and that's it. And we would move on to the next. And we tried to produce at least one every 3 or 4 months for a couple of years, like maybe three, up until it became impossible with studies and other activities to maintain a regular schedule. And then there was the time to choose a professional path. And the funny thing is that when I was 17, I wanted to be a comic book artist. And my mother discouraged me. I
A
guess
classic story. That's what
yeah,
I hear from
yeah,
almost
very
everybody.
classic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't have the confidence to really fight.
Mm,
Um, so I went on to study history in college.
mhm.
And after like 4 years of that and graduating with a master's degree, I was like, what am I going to do with this? I'm not interested. Um, at
Teach
that
other
time,
people. That's what you do.
what?
That's what you do when you get a degree like that. Is you just go on to teach other people to get the same degree.
Right. No,
Yeah,
not my
yeah,
style. But I was already like really into, okay, I need to be in publishing. I need to be
yeah.
in publishing. When I was 21, I had an awakening. Um, it's I was like, okay, if I cannot be a comic book artist, I'm gonna be a graphic designer. And for all the dinosaurs like me, when I was 21, it was 1991. So it was the beginning of what was then called desktop publishing,
Mhm.
which is now graphic design.
I'm a graphic designer as well. That's my normal day-to-day job. So you're
And these were the first generations of professional Macintosh. It was Photoshop was version 1.5, Illustrator
oh God.
1.0. So it was really the beginning. Quark was 3.11 or 3.1.
Mhm.
It was really the beginning of the beginning.
Yeah.
So I jumped on that train and I had to have to teach myself how to do it because I tried to get into one of the few schools that could help me complete my training and be a professional, but no school uh, wanted to let me
Mm.
in Paris because I was already a college graduate, and at the time it was perceived as something that only people who failed their high school test could do.
Oh, okay. So they assume you've got your career. You don't need to waste
So yeah, so I had a lot of
resources.
closed doors, and people like telling me like, well, you're not going to take the place of someone who has failed their tests. Let's give them a chance, and you look like a smart young man. You'll figure it out, which is something
Yeah.
like by principle I hate.
Yeah,
I
that's
hate
soul shattering to
say
tell
that to
someone
people.
like, look, you made your decision, you're stuck with it the rest of your life. Like
Right,
regardless of whether you want
right.
to do it or not, that's your career. Go do it until you die. Like
And
that's
and I
horrifying.
get and I guess that's the story of my life. I have hard time taking no for an answer.
Mm.
So when people say that to me, I usually double down.
Hmm.
So I self-taught and I got a job after 1 year of training, like hard while I was finishing my studies, my history studies. Um, I got
Even
a
like
job.
training yourself wouldn't have been that easy in the time. It's not like there were
It
tutorials
was
online
very
you could
difficult.
follow or.
Wait, first I had to buy a computer.
Yes.
which were extremely expensive. So I literally racketed my own family, everyone, like give me a few, give me a few, give me a few, so that I could buy one of those old Macintosh classics.
Mhm.
You know,
Yep.
those boxes
Yeah.
that
The
had
boat,
a 9-inch black and white screen
the boat anchor, I call them.
and had like 4 megabytes of RAM and 40 megabytes of storage.
Wow.
It was slow as F, and I don't know if I can curse in
Oh,
this episode.
absolutely. Curse away.
It was
Yeah.
slow as fuck.
Yeah. Oh, I curse all the
Um,
time.
and it was not reliable, but I learned a ton.
Yeah.
And when I felt I was ready enough, I got an opportunity to get into a weekly magazine, a local weekly magazine, where I was hired. I don't even know how they hired me, but they hired me. They had a need. They were at odds with their own graphic designer, so they fired him. They hired me. It lasted for 6 months. It was very, very hard every day, but hey, you have to start somewhere and learn
Yeah.
somewhere. So
Trial by fire. You got to
um,
jump in and do
it
it.
was really trial by fire, like really, and there were a lot of fires. It was a weekly magazine of 48 pages. I was the only designer,
Oh, Jesus.
and
All right. Yeah.
and I had a very unreliable material. So
No.
it was really, really tough.
What kind of
You
magazine
have to
was it?
remember that at that time, Photoshop didn't even have more than Command Z. You couldn't have unlimited.
Oh,
Uh,
man. Oh, man.
yeah, but
Well, what
yeah,
was the magazine about?
it was a Jewish magazine.
Oh,
It was a
okay.
it was a Jewish magazine that was serving the Parisian community, and it was a complete. I mean, I'm not gonna get into detail.
Oh,
It's
that's fine.
not
Yeah.
really
I'm just curious about the
not it's
content,
not
I
it's
guess.
not really relevant anymore. But this is how I learned
Yeah.
a lot of stuff. And then after that, the company went bankrupt after 6 months, and I couldn't find another job for another year and a half.
Oh, wow.
So I did some volunteering because I didn't want to stay and do nothing. I did some volunteering, and I mean, fortunately, at the time, my girlfriend, which would become my first wife, she was working. She was a journalist. She was working, so we could survive,
Yeah. Make ends meet.
but on a very tight budget, but we could survive. And 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 yeah, and then after that, the next job that I had, it was in 95. I was paid by the hour.
Hmm.
So some weeks I was paid like 30 hours. Some weeks I was paid 10 hours. I was on call. Like,
Mhm.
we need you today. Show up. And it was very disturbing. Um, so but anyhow, flash forward 3 years after that, I get an opportunity. My grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor, she put everything that she had in the bank, and she said to all her grandkids, including me, okay, taxes are going to kill me, so I'm going to give you your inheritance while I'm still alive. So A, we don't pay taxes, and B, we actually see what you're going to do with it.
Mhm. Well, that's quite a gift.
That's quite a gift. And with that little money, which was the equivalent of $1,000 of now, but at the time, like, you have to understand, it was 1997.
Hmm.
It was a lot of money back
Yeah.
then.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And I decided to create my first company and create the first ever news magazine about American comics in France, and it was called Comic Box.
Mhm.
And I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but that's how I really started in the comic book business as a journalist. And I was also doing the design, and it was really fascinating because I was writing the articles and designing at the same time, which would save me a lot of time.
So were you the only contributor? Did you have other folks with you doing the writing?
No,
Okay.
no, my partner at the time was working with me
Oh,
because
nice.
she was a journalist, but
Yeah.
she
Wait,
she quit her job. She went on to work with me, and then I hired a couple of other people. And we were I think we ended up after the first 3 years, we ended up being I don't know, 6, 7
wow.
on the team.
So was it something along the lines of like Wizard Magazine over here, or is it like when you were like
Well,
doing stories about
let me
upcoming
put it
comics?
this way because I get that question a lot.
Well, I just for
Um,
context, I'm sure it was quite different,
right.
but you know.
Wizard was a fan magazine
Hmm.
by fans for fans.
Oh, okay, I see.
Comic Box was a news magazine. Like the everything was about editorial. Everything was
Yeah.
about
Okay.
in-depth interviews, 4 to 6 pages every time,
Right.
and
Okay.
long 6 to 8 pages features. It was very serious. We were
Yeah.
taking comics very seriously.
That's awesome. No, that's
And
really cool.
we started in the first issue was published in July 1998, and boom, 10,000 copies.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And yeah,
That must have been quite an eye-opening,
it was like, well, the thing is that the first issue is still bittersweet to me to this day because that's the secret origin. Like the day we were supposed to send, I mean, the week we were supposed to send the issue to the printer, we had a virus on our Macs,
Oh,
which
geez.
is extremely rare.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was a virus named AutoStart 9701, as I remember it.
Uh-huh.
And every time we were saving a page on Quark, it would erase it from our
Oh
computer.
no. Oh no. Oh no.
So when we realized that, we had to redo the entire
Oh God.
magazine
Oh
in
God.
one night.
Oh my God. Well, it's a hell of a story. You can look back on it now, I'm sure, and laugh, you know?
I'm laughing, but it's like it's the most disgusting
Oh, yeah.
graphic design I've ever produced because it was rushed.
Yeah.
And but the irony is that it sold 10,000 copies, and
Nowhere to
people
go
are
but up
still
after that.
treasuring it to
Yeah.
this day. Like
Yeah.
I was in France last week, as I mentioned. I was in France last week, and I meet this guy at a bar, and he recognizes me, and he said, like, "Are you Fabrice Sapolsky?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, like, "I have to tell you that when I was 16, I bought the first issue of Comic Box, and it changed my life. And now I'm a comic book journalist, just like you were."
Oh wow. That's heartwarming.
And like, well, first it gives you a slap in the face that, oh, you're an old fart.
Yeah,
And
yeah. How much time ago? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's like, I mean, 27 years.
yeah, yeah.
So
No, but
that's a long
that's
time ago.
even like thinking about what would have been considered professional journalism about comics, even in our side of the pond there, that wasn't like, Wizard, like I said, is the only real benchmark we had. And
I mean, there
and
was Comic Book Journal.
yeah, but
There
that
was,
a lot of that went into other stuff though. That wasn't just, it was like
yeah.
price guides and other stuff. Like, they had it, but it just didn't feel like it was, I don't know, like it didn't feel like I was reading a newspaper about comics. It just felt like, and getting those interviews must have been interesting and a
Oh, it
difficult.
was fantastic. We were
Yeah.
doing everything by phone, of course.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of nights with the time difference. We
Yeah.
spent a lot of nights, but they were surprised that we knew as much as we did about their comics.
Really?
And we got a pretty good track record after a few issues
Hmm.
of getting the big name talents. And it's just like no one was asking at the time. Like it was not like no one was asking them for an interview. There was there was internet, but no one was reading an interview on the internet at the time.
Hmm.
There was no video interview. And in magazines, I mean, as you mentioned, it was either you're an old talent and you're doing a in-depth interview with all your career,
Yeah.
or you're a young talent and no one wants to talk to you.
Hmm.
And I remember for the first issue, who did we have for the first issue? I think we had David Finch,
Nice.
and he was
Wow.
starting in the business.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah.
That's amazing.
But we had tons of talents. Jeff Loeb. By issue 5, we were We had Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti. They were launching the Marvel Knights. And then we could, in November of 1998, we visited them in New York. My partner and I, we had to go to New York, and for a family event.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to Marvel. They toured us at the time. Chris Claremont was the managing editor.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really great. And the funny thing is that's a funny story that I don't think I've told enough. When we get to Chris Claremont, the PR at the time, she said, don't you have something to have Chris sign for you? And we came as journalists, and I think they were not prepared. They thought that we were just a couple of fans.
Yeah.
And so Chris Claremont looked at me and he said, okay, all right. He pulls out a copy of Fantastic Four drawn by Carlos Pacheco, signs it, and said, here's your copy. That's how little we were in fan modes.
Yeah.
And I would say that when you are going to be a professional, you have to leave the fan at the door, which we did. We always did that. It was never about being a fan and trying to serve fans. It was about trying to deliver the most accurate information to an audience that didn't have anything like that before, especially on a monthly basis. It was crazy to create a monthly magazine about American comics. There were people who said, a monthly magazine about American comics, you're going to last 3 issues. Well, not only the magazine lasted for 114 issues, after I was gone, it survived
beyond
3 bankruptcies. It always came back.
Yeah.
It's still published to this day, not as a monthly anymore, not as a bi-monthly, but as what the French call a MOOC, which is a magazine book.
Okay.
MOOC.
Oh yeah.
So it's like a 250-page annual.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
But it's still published. It still exists.
Wow.
And so I'm very proud that this brand that we created out of thin air with almost no money has inspired people and is still around. So
yeah, absolutely. And you're right about that. You really because obviously I do this. So in speaking with some people that I'm fans of, I love their work. You really do have to leave it at the door, and I realize they're just people with stories. Otherwise, you can, a friend of mine. I talked to Mark Russell a while ago, and I'm a big fan of his work. And a friend of mine teased me because he listened to the interview and he said that it was all pretty above board. He said, but at one point, it almost seemed like there's this old SNL sketch with Chris Farley where he's playing an interviewer and he's talking to a guy who's just starstruck the whole time. He'd be like, remember when you were Harrison Ford or something? He's like, remember when you were in Star Wars? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, that was cool. And then to just be nothing. My friend even said to me, he's like, there's one moment where I thought you were heading that way. He said, just because I could tell I knew you were a big fan of him, but you pulled it back. I said, oh, thanks. I said it was tight.
So yeah. So, and then after a few years, we started going to Comic-Cons in the US and every time we were going to San Diego, I think we started going to San Diego in 2001. Every time we started to go to San Diego, we were coming back with 10, 20, 14 interviews, and that would feel
finish, absolutely
for a while. And it was always interesting. But the thing that really changed everything for me was, of course, Spider-Man Noir.
Yeah. Well, how did that come about?
That came about in London.
Oh.
On December 6th, 2006.
Okay.
And I remember that vividly and perfectly because I was invited at a meeting with Titan Comics, the British publisher, to pitch a magazine because I was also doing a lot of magazines for kids. So because I was tight with DC Comics, the person in charge of the DC licensing at the time, Sandy Resnick, who's now working for Webtoon, at the time it was working for DC, and Sandy said, I'm going to put you in touch with the people at Titan because you're doing the French version of Batman, but maybe you could do the British version of Batman and it would probably be better. So I went there. But before I went to my lunch meeting with Titan, I visited my friend David Hine. And I met David. This is a very interesting story. So I met David 2 years prior to that, or a year prior to that. It's not really clear in my mind. In San Diego, at one of those famous breakfasts that were organized by Richard Starkings. Richard Starkings, for those who don't know who he is the inventor of modern lettering. He created a ton of fonts from the early 90s on. He lettered and designed a lot of books, iconic books. He's also a writer. He also draws. No, not a lot of people know that, but he also draws.
It's a part of the industry that people don't discuss a lot, the lettering,
Yeah,
and
and
it's one that should be.
Richard was one of the first people we interviewed for Comic Box. I think he was in Comic Books number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And me being such a design nerd, the way characters were talking in comics was fascinating to me. So I really was looking forward to meeting him. So we started talking, and then we became friends. And at San Diego, he said, like, Fabrice, you need to be at those breakfasts. You're coming. You can't say no. It's on Saturday, the Saturday of the con. You're coming. You don't know who you're going to be seated next to, but I'm taking care of that. And I did it in, I think, 2004, 2005, and 2006. And I met 3 of my best friends to this day through breakfasts of Richard Starkings. And one of them is David Hine. And David and I, we really bonded. First, he's speaking beautiful French, which not a lot of people know.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, his partner is French. His son at home, they spoke French. So, and he can read and write in French. The very interesting thing is that I'm probably the only person he refuses to speak French with. He always said to me, like, well, your English is good enough. I don't have to make an effort. So,
so you make the effort.
So I made the effort.
Yeah.
So in 2006, I said, okay, well, let's have breakfast with Dave Hine before I go to meet Titan. And the morning I woke up, I arrived the day before and went to a hotel in Kensington where David requested we met. I got the idea for Spider-Man Noir. I had only had 2 things when I met with him. One, the title, Spider-Man Noir. The second thing is the opening scene from Spider-Man 1 #1, where this very dark Spider-Man is chased by the cops after J. Jonah Jameson is dead, is killed. Mm-hmm. And the headlines were, who killed JJJ? And I take it to David, and I've told this story many times. David turns it down. He says that it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous idea, and no one will ever buy it. And I go and have my meeting, take my train back to Paris. And when I come back home, I find a very long email from Dave saying that the idea has haunted him all day and he changed his mind, but it would have to be more pulp than noir. And actually, on the first draft of the pitch, the project comes with the 2 titles because I refused to let go. And I said, no, it has to be Spider-Man Noir. Spider-Man pulp, no one will buy it.
Noir has a certain connotation more than pulp does. I mean, pulp does in a certain community, but noir reaches a bit farther than that for sure.
Exactly. It's more powerful.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess the rest is history. We agreed that we were going to do it together and that he was going to be the one to pitch it to Marvel, and I would act as co-writer. Even though most of the ideas came from me, because David had a relationship with Marvel that I didn't have at the time. I mean, I had it, but as a journalist, so it was kind of like weird.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a transition for them to go from seeing you as a journalist to an actual writer, I'd imagine.
Right. And you know how it is when you when you pitch something that is unsolicited to a big company like Marvel, it ends up in the trash before they even read it. So Dave sent a message to Joe Quesada, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, say, hey, we have this. I mean, I have this story, this pitch. Would you mind taking a look? And Joe said yes. And then he loved it. And
rest is history.
yep.
That's fantastic. Well, that was like, I remember when that came out, and I was a big fan of it as well because, I'm a big Spider-Man fan. Anything Spider-Man, I generally grab. But it seemed to me, and maybe this is just my memory, but it seemed like it was one of the first kind of leading into all the Spider-Verse stuff, right? Because it was when we started getting more stories of various Spider-Man from different realities.
Right. This is the thing that was really strange. At the time, DC had stopped doing Elseworlds.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel was not doing any alternate reality thing, no what ifs, nothing. And then we come with this thing, and there was no other Spider-Man from another dimension. Remember that at the time, Spider-Man 2099 was just the future of Spider-Man. It was not a different dimension. There was no other thing like Spider-Man Noir. And we come there was no Spider-Verse. It didn't have a name. Dane Slott coined it, or Dane Slott or Brian Bendis. I don't even remember.
I think Slott did it,
Yeah, one of the two coined it like in 2014 or 2013. But before Spider-Man Noir, there was nothing like that. And the thing that really also was strange is that when the book got picked, we were in the dark for 2 years.
Oh, really?
Like, we turned in our scripts the first semester of 2007 for the first miniseries of 4. And Carmine started working on it. The book only came out in December of 2008.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize there was that big of a gap.
First issue. And so we completed the book sometime in 2007, and then for a year, nothing happened. And our editor was not answering anything. So I remember that summer 2008, Dave and I were in San Diego, and I spot my editor on the Marvel booth. So Dave pushes me. It's like, go and ask him. So I went and asked him, and the editor said, Warren Simons, at the time, he said, look for previews catalog in 6 weeks. I said, that's it? He said, that's it. That's all I'm going to say. And so I looked into previews catalogs 6 weeks later, but actually a week before that, I opened a Marvel comic and I see an ad for X-Men Noir. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Oh, yeah, right. I forgot about that. Right. Yeah.
What the hell is X-Men Noir? I've never heard of this thing. Where's our book? And a week later, previews comes out, and it's the whole Marvel Noir line. So number one, we didn't know there was a whole Marvel Noir line at all. And second, who are these 3 other books? What are they? And they have a different editor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
There was kind of I wouldn't say a fight, but a disagreement at the Marvel editorial offices.
Yeah.
Between editors, some of them thinking that if you're going to do something as cool as Marvel Noir, characters shouldn't have powers.
Okay.
But Spider-Man Noir had already been approved, drawn, written, packaged. It was there.
Yeah.
So they chose to put us in a box and say Spider-Man Noir is going to be Spider-Man Noir with his powers, but we're going to do all the others without powers. We're going to show you guys how it's done. Which is funny because we're years after, and
your character is the one that's endured.
Is ours.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to comment on that.
Oh, that's fine.
Editorial decisions were made. We were not even aware of it. It is what it is.
Yeah, that's crazy that obviously they like the idea if they decide to make a whole imprint with it. Well,
they just didn't like the direction, but the market corrected that.
as it often does.
But that was the original sin, and for a long time we were the child that you forget on the parking lot at the supermarket. Like once the first miniseries was released, we got called in at the Marvel offices in 2009. It was February 2009. At the time, New York Comic Con was in February.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to be there for Comic Box, of course, covering New York Comic Con, and Dave was there for his other activities. He had an image book at the time, I think. So Marvel says, like, are you going to be there in New York? Come to the office. We come to the office. We meet with the editors, Warren Simons, Alejandro Arbona. And they both said, okay, we're in a huge crisis. The economy is terrible. We have the budget for another miniseries right now. We want you to deliver in 3 weeks.
Oh, no.
And we want Venom. Dave and I, we look at each other and we're like, 3 weeks? We had like almost a year to prepare the first volume, and now you want it in 3 weeks.
And then you left it on the shelf for 2 years.
Well, that's another story.
Yeah, I know, it's still, yeah.
You want it in 3 weeks? And then they start suggesting things. And we're like, it's gonna be a battle. It's gonna be, because the first one had no idea what we were gonna do. So they let us do pretty much what we wanted to do. The only fight we had was on the gun, because I was strongly against it. I don't think Spider-Man should have a gun. And Marvel did whatever they could to bend that. And I guess I lost. Spider-Man has a gun. But in the issues that Dave and I have written and that were illustrated by Carmine, except for the covers, because Marvel thought it looked cool. He never uses a gun except once.
Right.
In the first miniseries in issue 4. But if not for that, no gun, no hat, no stupid hat.
You must have loved when the movie came around then.
Don't start me on this.
Well, because the movie seemed to kind of wash him into more of a pulp, like the pulp idea, than the noir idea. Well, the original noir idea, like the 50s.
Well, okay, I'm going to kill the suspense right now.
Yeah.
So I didn't like it. It was an out-of-body experience seeing that movie and seeing a character that I created with the name I came up with being everything but the character I created.
Yeah. Well, you had a chance because you wrote on the Shattered Dimensions game, right? That featured. No. You didn't write on that?
I was not consulted. No.
Oh, really?
No.
You're credited as it. I thought that you perhaps had a bigger hand in it, but I guess not. Just because of the character.
Credited because they didn't give me any money.
Oh, really? Shit.
They did. I was not in any meetings. So great. I don't know who came up with that credit, but thank you for nothing.
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah, it's on your IMDb. But yeah, well, that must be, I mean, you hear all these stories about people that have created things for big companies, and then eventually the company takes it and does their thing with it. You know, obviously the Marvel Universe proper.
You have to understand that Spider-Man Noir is a derivative.
Yeah, of course.
Spider-Man was never mine in the first place.
Yes.
And when you create for these companies, it is with the understanding that you're a surrogate parent, that at one point, the company will let you do what you want until they don't.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's precisely what happened, because as the character became increasingly popular, Marvel decided to pull the rug off our feet and take control again. And I want to be very clear. I don't like it, but that's the deal.
Yeah.
They have every right to do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I was treated well. So
did you have any like indication about how different they'd made it? Like when that movie came, did you know nothing until the movie came out and you went to see it, and that's your first interaction with their version? I was
invited to the premiere. Marvel actually asked me if I wanted to go to the premiere, which I thought was a double slap in the face. I was not credited in the movie either.
Hmm. Yeah, which is you should be
I was
100%.
not traded.
Yeah.
Strangely, when Marvel decided in 2020 to create a Spider-Man noir miniseries without David I,
Mhm.
and we learned about it probably a week before release,
Oh wow.
um, they still credited us as creators
Mhm.
in the book, a book that we have nothing to do with. And that is basically Marvel taking the movie concept and making it into the new incarnation of the character.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest misconception about Spider-Man Noir. Spider-Man Noir is not a detective.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the version of the
Noir
movie was just a name only.
is not a detective, he's a social justice warrior.
Hmm.
But that part has been erased.
Yeah.
Everything that Dave and I put into this project was erased. So I moved on.
Yeah. As you
So when
should.
people talk to me about it all the time, I'm like, please, I've released 5 other creator-owned graphic novels since my last contribution to Spider-Man Noir in 2018.
Hmm.
I created my own publishing company, FairSquare Comics, and I edited over 150 comics and graphic novels for various companies. So I'm not a one-trick pony. I'm someone who's been in this industry for a long time. Hopefully will be until the day I die. And I have a lot to show and I have a lot to offer. So I don't even like mention Spider-Man Noir anymore. I mean, it's still on my banner when I go to shows, but it's this tiny little line that is under everything else. And if you want to read it, you read it, but you will not find anything Spider-Man related on my table.
Hmm.
I moved on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the only way to keep your sanity. I mean, in some way, I mean, you can let it destroy you. You can move on and keep doing what you
You
do,
have
right?
to control what you can control.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I cannot control anything Marvel. I wish them well. We need
Hmm.
a strong Marvel to drive a stronger market.
Yeah,
I mean
100%.
it. Like, I've known CB Sapolsky for 25 years. Every time he's at a con, he shakes my hand. I shake his hand. We're very cordial.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that we're going to work together anytime soon because
Hmm.
I don't think they're interested. If they were interested in my talent or anything that I had to offer, they would have asked me. They
Yeah.
had 20 years to do it. They did not. You know, as I said, after we did the second miniseries in 2009, Marvel called us back in 2014 for the Spider-Verse crossover. It was a one-issue gig.
Hmm.
It sold 120,000 copies. And we did not get a third miniseries or an ongoing or nothing.
Mm.
And then they called back again in 2018 when they were doing Spider-Geddon so that we could do not a comic, but a video comic on YouTube.
Hmm.
And that was the last thing that I did for them. So I moved on.
Yeah. Well, into quite a extensive, career beyond that, as you mentioned, with your own imprint and the other work you've been working on as
But
well.
the thing is, it's another misconception. People think that when you work with the big companies, you're going to have money and opportunities.
Yeah. No, that's not how it works.
I got none,
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
The only thing that I got in this business comes from my personal relationships or my hard work.
Hmm.
That's it.
Yep. Yeah.
There's a few key people that helped me. They know who they are. I will love them forever for that. But most of the time, I had to do it myself.
Well, now that you've stepped into, the beyond evil, I mean, I guess before when you were creating magazines, you were already sort of in an editor position running a company. But now you're doing it strictly as a comic imprint. How does it feel to be in that position and sort of be overseeing the whole
It's
thing?
the most selfless, ridiculously busy, and hard gig.
Yeah.
It
Well,
is really difficult
I often
because
talk about how creative types aren't the easiest to corral sometimes, and when you're working with an industry that's full of them, sometimes it can be, I imagine, a bit hard in the head.
it's not just that. Is okay. So FairSquare Comics was born out of rage.
Hmm.
I was actually inspired by Todd McFarlane because I remember Todd McFarlane saying, I create companies out of rage.
That's great. I just had Eric Larson on the show before you, and we
Yeah.
talked about the advent of that and some of that interesting stuff. So
I don't necessarily agree with everything Todd does or is,
mhm.
but have to give props to the man. Todd has been an inspiration as an entrepreneur. And when in 2020 I got let go of my job as senior editor at Humanoids, where I had been for 2.5 years, um, I was lost. And it was the pandemic.
Mm.
And I didn't want to let go of comics. There was no way. Like, I always say that to a lot of kids or a lot of creators. No one but you should decide if you should stay in comics or not.
Mm-hmm.
No one has the right to tell you if your time has come.
Mm-hmm. No,
Either you decide to leave and you have your reasons, or you go 6 feet under, and that's
it's a
decisions
decisions made. Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
But yeah, I decided that my time was that I still had a lot to offer, and thankfully, my current partner, Crystal, she really supported me into creating the company. And summer 2020, after uh, after the George Floyd murder,
Mm-hmm.
and I was very angry at the situation in America, and I never forget that. I mean, it was the Trump administration, as you know, and I'm a green card holder. I'm a resident here, and when you a lot of Americans don't know that, but when you get your green card, the people at the USCIS tell you, well, I hope you behave, because remember, you're just a guest in this country.
How welcoming.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I had uh, a peek out of it
Yeah.
when I got my visa, because I came here first with an artist visa in 2015. And when I got to the border and showed my visa for the first time, the guy at the border said to me, I hope you have enough money, because we have enough homeless people in this country.
Oh shit. Jesus
So,
Christ.
so
Thanks.
again, like, I already had like the warning, like,
Yeah.
the flags were planted. That was that was it. So I knew from the start that my life in America would be a challenge, and
Yeah.
I accepted the challenge. So I have no regrets. As I said, I love being here, and I don't want to go back to my home country. This is where I live. This is where I chose to live, and there's no way I'm getting somewhere else right now. So, and it's the same for comics.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in love with American comics. I am very sad that outside of the US and Canada, American comics are not recognized as they should. They're not selling as well. They are completely absent. Like, I went to Angoulême a couple of weeks ago, and American comics were largely absent from everywhere. It was just manga and European comics,
Yeah.
and that's it. Because in France, the market share of American comics is 3%.
Wow.
That says a lot about how Americans are an island.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
They're a continent, but they're an island.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that because of who I am, being from there, living here, I need to embrace the fact that I could be a bridge.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because you said earlier, and that's something that kind of stuck with me when we were talking, is that the original character of Noir was social justice person, and of course you mentioned that the rage that came with making your own company was about the social justice and stuff that came with the George Floyd murder. So like, I guess to me it seems like that's something that does bleed into your work a lot. And
I mean, like, look, I'm not going to be shy about it. I'm a progressive motherfucker.
Yeah, good. I mean, most creative types are, I find anyway. I mean, not everybody, but
I am. And again, I'm not going to apologize for it. Like, I have progressive ideas,
mm-hmm.
and it manifests in every book that we do at FairSquare Comics. So
Mhm.
Noir is the New Black was the first one. The anthology Noir is the New Black, we raised 50,000 copies on Kickstarter, and the new edition, the third edition, just came out. We sold over 6,500 copies of it.
Beautiful.
This is a lot for a small publisher.
Yes.
And it's the gift that keeps giving. We have 47 Black creators on it. They all keep 100% of the creative rights, and I'm very proud of that book. That should be in every household, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little miracle. I mean, T.C. Harris, who has been my co-editor on this book, and myself, we put together the original version of it, which had 16 stories originally. Now it's 18. It has 16 stories. I mean, it had 12, then 16. We put that together in less than 6 months, which is really not a lot for a comic book. So it was really a miracle. It's funny. One day I was talking to David Walker, who has a story in the book, and he said, like, I don't say that lightly, or I don't say that all the time, but Noir is the New Black is one of those books that I can wholeheartedly recommend to anyone because I'm proud of every story that is in this book.
That's awesome.
And I took that as a huge compliment, first because David is a very gifted comic book professional and writer, and I consider him a friend. But moreover, it tells a lot about the talents that we had, the trust that they put in me, and the product that we delivered together. You know?
Yeah.
So
No, that's
and then, like, the company took shape in the weeks after that, and we kind of came up with the tagline that my son found: comics from the rest of us, because FairSquare Comics is the only family, immigrant, and minority-owned comic book company in America. I wish there were others, but with those three things baked in the same company, we're the only ones. And Crystal and I are, like, going from show to show, from place to place to promote the books. We're tirelessly creating, promoting, diversifying. We published 17 graphic novels last year. Hopefully we can do the same this year, even though the market is very complicated right now. And like, we're trying to cater to every demographics, every audience. We have kids books, we have YA, we have noir books, of course, we have thrillers, we have horror, we're going to have manga by the end of the year. We're trying to be a mini general interest mainstream publisher, a mini mainstream publisher.
That's awesome. No, just looking through the what you guys offer, the diverse amount of books and characters and stories. I see Howard Chaykin does a book, which is pretty cool.
That book came through the partnership that we had all 2023 with a company called Alien Books.
Oh yes, yep.
That's one of the things that I also do is when other publishers from other countries come to me and say, "Hey, can you help me? I don't know the American market. I want to set up shop there." And Matthias Timarchi from Alien Books came to me and said, like, "Can you help us?" And we imprinted Alien Books under FairSquare Comics for a year. Now they're flying solo, and they took over the Valiant license. And
oh, really? Wow, good for them.
They're doing really well. So I wish them the best, and we're still very much friends. And yeah, I really love this team, Danny and Lisa and Martin and of course Matthias. So
yeah, well, it's a beautiful stuff. And I mean, can all be bought at fairsquarecomics.com? Is that where you generally are selling out of online?
Well, no, I mean, yes and no. Like, people can still buy them in comic book stores when comic book stores have the audacity to order them.
Well, I will ask my local store and see if they can get it for me.
We have a full-fledged worldwide distribution deal with Diamond, so you can find us at any Barnes and Noble, Amazon, comic book store, independent bookstores, and at shows. We're doing 20 to 30 shows a year, and on the FairSquare Comics web store, of course. Yes,
awesome.
But it's interesting because a lot of people, when they meet me for the first time, they go, "Oh, you're self-publishing." I am not self-publishing. Self-publishing is when you're only publishing your own material.
Yeah. You're
I
just a
am
publisher.
publishing.
Yeah, you're
I'm a
just
publisher.
publishing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just publishing. So there's a lot of education
Yes.
to do,
Well, I feel like people put you in a box, and not just you, but people like to
which I
put other
hate.
people in
Like,
boxes. Yeah, they
if
do.
you
It's
look at my body of work,
yeah.
honestly, if you look at my body of work, I have Spider-Man Noir, which we're not going to talk about. We give him too much time already
Sure
on this
enough.
podcast.
Yeah.
There's Intertwine, that is a kung fu murder mystery where the hero is an immigrant. You have The Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng, which is the first ever Asian Jewish character in comics, which is also tied to the Intertwine franchise. I have Lady Bird, which is a YA story about human trafficking with superpowers. I have One Hit Wonder, which is a crime comedy in the vein of Elmo Leonard and Quentin Tarantino. I have The Black Box, which is a supernatural thriller, like what's the name of that movie? National Treasure, with supernatural. And I have what do I have? I'm missing one. What's my fifth? And I'm going to release No Future, which is a post-apocalyptic book where the enemy is time.
Yeah. Wow. This all sounds amazing.
So yeah, I have all these, and not to mention, of course, the beautiful creators we're working with. I mean, just in January, February of 2024, beyond the Noir is the New Black expanded edition that I mentioned, we have Watson and Holmes, which is a reinvention of Sherlock Holmes in modern day Harlem. It's a book that I'm extremely proud of, and that we took over from the original creator of the series, Brandon Perlow. And we have a book that we acquired from a French publisher called I Run to Make My Heart Beat, which is the story of this, the real story. It's a slice of life book of this woman who's Black, Jewish, and Muslim, an athlete and a law graduate. How about that? And she's real. I met her.
Oh, wow. Really? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I mean, we try to be as diverse as we can in terms of themes, audiences, characters, everything. And the idea is to think out of the box, to think out of the box, to publish different. When I go to a comic book store, I feel like a lot of comics look like each other.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
They kind of like created from the same mold. And this is not what I wanted for FairSquare Comics. Not at all. I wanted something a little different. It's
a bad marketing thing when people think that because one thing sells, everything should be that thing. And instead of, it's like this, we got a movie with, a spy movie did well this year. So now we need 20 more spy movies. Like it's
right. And in comics is even more true.
Oh yes. 100%. Yeah. And that's why you see the second one comic line does something. You see all the others do the same thing, just slightly different.
Exactly.
And you're right.
This is not my style. I'm not a follower. I'm more of a pioneer.
Yeah, I would definitely say that.
And it's not easy every day, because not every book is going to find its audience right away. Sometimes you have to wait. You have to be patient. I mean, 2 years ago we did this book on women who decide to opt out of motherhood, and it came out at the same time as the Roe v. Wade cancellation.
Well, that's timing.
Well, it was not on purpose.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I didn't mean to imply
that book because we thought it was topical. But we sold thousands of copies of it, and we're still selling it to this day. Again, you have to find the stories that resonate with people. I often say that if you close one of our books and you don't feel anything, we didn't do a good job. Comics and graphic novels are supposed to be a sensory experience, an emotional experience. They have to make you feel something. If it's just a shallow book, then we didn't do our job. And you have every right to be pissed at us. So Like we have a book coming out in April called A Fox in My Brain, which is a book about mental health. It's done by this woman. She's chronicling her journey to understand her condition, to understand her disease. She has cyclothymia,
Mhm.
Which is something that not a lot of graphic novelists would admit, like mental health.
Mm.
But she's doing it with so much humor and sharpness that, like, when I saw that book, I was like, people need to see it. We need to publish that.
Yeah.
And I hope that it works. You know, I hope that retailers buy it, then the public buys it, because this is just a fantastic graphic novel, period.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the passion definitely bleeds through, and often that's where I find, when you read books like that that really make you feel something. And I always kind of say the same thing when it comes to like movies, books, anything. It's like if it makes you feel anything, it's not a wasted experience. There's so
right.
much
I
stuff
mean,
that's disposable.
call me a terrible comic book person, but I still believe in the power of gut feeling.
Yep. Yep.
When I am selecting a project, I don't only look at metrics. I'm like, is that a book that I want to sell? Is that a book that I will be proud of when I come to a show and I will pitch it to someone who never heard of FairSquare Comics? That's the feeling that I had when I got a book called Beyondtopia Legends, which is a collection of stories from Indonesian creators. It was brought to me by Henry Barajas and Brian Valenza, and they had been turned down by a lot of publishers before us. But when I saw it, I was like, you know what? I'll do it. Financially, it was not a good decision, but editorially and humanly, it was the best decision.
Yeah.
First, because I gave these guys a voice, and I'm very proud of it. And second, when we pitch it to people at cons, it's one of our best-selling books.
Wow.
It's just that in stores, a lot of retailers overlooked it or didn't really know what to do with it. So it was not the hit that I wanted it to be, but I will not let go. This is a good title. This is also one of these few titles where if people like horror, we have horror in it. If you like sci-fi, there's a sci-fi story. If you like romance, there's a romance story. Everything is packed. Every genre is packed into this beautiful capsule called Beyondtopia Legends. And it makes sense with the fact that it comes from Indonesian creators and they took their own legends and made them available, palatable for an American audience. So I will never stop doing this and taking those decisions based on quality, based on gut feeling, based on heart. Fortunately, there are other books that that are more popular, but as a publisher, you can't just look at your lineup and say, "Hey, I'm just going to publish hits." You can't predict that; it's not possible.
Oh God, no! And
when
people that try have failed a lot.
When I was working for other publishers, and one in particular, I would not say who, they ordered a document that was supposedly giving publishers the trends for the next 2 years, so that they could start working on books that were trendy by the time they would be ready. To me, that is, it contradicts the very nature of graphic novels and comics. Graphic novel and comics are universal and they're timeless. If you're doing them, if you're creating them the right way, with a lot of heart, with honesty, at the end of the day, they will find their audience.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you found yours and the passion. I love it. I love anybody when I hear anybody talk passionately about comics, it makes me so happy. Anything else coming up that you wanted to discuss? You guys got to go?
Yeah, I want to talk about another project that is very dear to my heart called Hyphen. Hyphen is an upcoming anthology. We released a preview already, but it's an upcoming anthology about Jewish diversity. And I feel like it's really something that is very much needed right now, because for some reason, especially in America, there are a lot of false narratives. There's a lot of conspiracies. There's a lot of cliches about the Jewish community. And I wanted to show in this Slice of Left books that it's not one size fits all. Like, the Jewish community is very diverse, very progressive. Sure, there are some conservative, but most of it is like extremely tolerant, open-minded. And these people have extraordinary stories. So we published the first 3 stories in a prelude that was sold at Juice, which is the Jewish Comics Experience. It's the only Jewish comic book convention in the world that I co-created with the Center for Jewish History in New York. And it's going to be a full-fledged graphic novel, hopefully by the end of this year. If not, if we're a little late, it's going to be early next year. But it's the book that people need to discover and educate themselves with.
Yeah, I can't think of any. It's funny because if you think about comics that would skew as featuring Jewish stories, I mean, aside from like Mouse or something that's about the Holocaust, there's nothing that I really, it doesn't come to mind. So the idea of Slice of Life.
Isn't that like, let me be trivial, ain't that a bitch?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like
Jewish people created this industry.
Yeah, no, 100%. But their stories, and like, I mean, Superman was created by Jews. Like the idea that like all of these people that created this industry built it up from the ground up, and their stories aren't even really told.
It's the minority that is the least represented in modern day comics.
100%. 100%. And every once in a while they'll throw a character at you and be like, well, here's a Jewish character, but it's never
but he's never really Jewish. Like,
no,
he's Jewish. He's technically Jewish. Like, I was like, really?
He's wears a Star of David around his neck or something, and that's about it. Like,
right. I mean, like take Batwoman for an example. And no offense to Greg Rucka, I really love Greg Rucka.
Yeah.
But Batwoman is supposedly Jewish and gay. What do people retain from that? She's gay.
Yeah.
Nothing in her adventures, maybe a menorah in the back of her apartment.
Yeah.
That's it. Nothing screams Jewish to me.
Yeah.
And my friend Danny Coleman, she's a wonderful writer, and she has this book at Vogue called Unfinished Corner that had a lot of awards. And she said at one panel I was with her, she said, like, we need to reclaim our narratives and release more Jewish stories, not just to educate people, but also because we're tired of having these stories where Jewish characters are either secular or dead.
Yeah.
And she's right. And that's why we're doubling down. That's why I did The Last Jewish Daughter of Kaifeng in the Intertwined universe. That's why I'm doing Hyphen. That's why we're going to release the book called Meshuggah, that is a Jewish horror story set in the Copenhagen ghetto in 1905. And it's beautiful. It's 164 pages, black and white. It's absolutely gorgeous, and people are going to see something that they've never seen before. We need that. And FairSquare Comics is a company that doesn't care to any community in particular. We're really talking to everybody, like, because comics are for everybody. And this is something that I'm very pleased about. Like, Noir is the New Black being a book with Black creators, everybody buys it. Like, not just Black people. Like, everyone buys it, and that's how it should be. Last Jewish Daughter, not just Jewish fans are buying it. Everybody's buying it. The book is sold out. It's just natural. Like, comics are universal. They carry universal values, and they're for everybody. So FairSquare Comics is there to really emphasize that.
Ah, beautiful. Well, I'll certainly do what I can on my end to promote as much of it as I can.
Thank you.
And I'm going to check out some of these books as well. They look amazing. The Very cool. The Frankenstein Dracula one looks right at my alley. This looks like a blast. And that one I really want to pick up, actually. So I'm a fan of noir narratives in general. I'm actually reading a book by Samuel Fuller right now, which is a noir detective kind of thing, which I'm very excited about. And gorgeous. Yeah, check all those out. We'll be putting them up on online. I'll be featuring those as well. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show, Fabrice. It's been awesome.
Thank you for having me. It was a great moment.
Oh, well, I very much appreciate it. And I hope to catch up with you somewhere down the line.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do that again.
All right. Sounds good. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There you have it, my chat with Fabrice Sapolsky. A very great conversation, very cool guy. Check out those books. I have already got, it's funny because we talk about local comic shops carrying his imprint, and oddly enough, after our conversation, I saw that my local comic shop in Halifax, about an hour away from here, is carrying the collection of the Noir is the New Black, which I was very interested in reading, so I got them to put that aside for me. I'm very excited to read it, and, see what tales are unfold within. It's cool to get a chance to be exposed to new creators, new artists, and everything that comes with new comics that's fresh and different. And so they have it. And, check in with your local comic shop and see if you can get it as well, if you don't see it there already. As he mentions, they are through Dynamite. You can get them through all the regular channels. But, always support your local comic shop if you can, because they need your support now more than ever, probably. And, the comic industry is ups and downs, but those people are usually passionate. I mean, that's what makes them want to go into comic books, because they love them. And let's reward that passion by supporting their work and getting our products from them. It certainly helps your local economy and puts a smile on some comic fans. So that's always a good reason to do it. Next week, we are talking with another person who went through the Marvel system, Fred Van Lente, who is a writer, worked on Marvel Comics for quite a while, more notably on the Marvel Zombies books. I think volumes 3, 4, and 5 were his, as well as actually getting to it in a conversation when I talked with him about how one particular scene in those books is one of the more disturbing scenes I've ever seen in a comic, and it's always stuck with me. Not necessarily because it's crazy gory, just because of how a character is sort of dispatched, a beloved character of mine. So I know it's a parallel universe, doesn't matter with the main continuity, but it's something that's interesting. And yeah, we have a great conversation, very personal guy, and a great chat. So make sure to tune in then to catch my conversation with Fred Van Lente. In the meantime, stay safe, have fun, read comics, and tune in next week. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.